Welcome back to the Female Leaders Bar. This is the Honesty Sessions, and I'm really pleased to be on stage with Danny, Head of Marketing and Comms for True Agency. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you, great to be here.
So just to give you a bit of an idea about format, these sessions are to inspire, to advise, but also just be honest about your journey, give some tips for success, and also let's be vulnerable and talk about some things that may have not gone so well. Yeah. But let's start with your journey, because it's always good. Although I know you, Danny, I don't know your whole career route. So could you just give us a bit of potted history about you and your journey so far?
Yeah, absolutely.
Come on, Catsy, put those on.
I started, get the headphones on. Welcome, have a seat.
Come on in, we want male allies. Brilliant.
So I started my career in various guises of marketing. So I actually started in music journalism. So I played a couple of roles, digital journalism, magazines. I got to go to a lot of festivals, interview bands. It was amazing, and was definitely really lucky to be at the forefront of social media when it was emerging, and really exploring how that could come to life. So I did that for about 4 years, and then I was actually recruited to join OMD, which is a media agency, to lead on social strategy for their Bose account. So it was a really great opportunity to use all of my experience in journalism, communications, digital media, and to really apply that to one of the biggest music brands in the world. So I did that for a while, and then had an opportunity to take on a national marketing role within OMD, and then worked my way up to head of marketing and communications globally for OMD.
No mean feat within a network agency. Pardon? I said no mean feat within a network agency. That's great.
It was definitely a ride, and I learned a lot. And I would definitely say that was my 8 years at OMD was when I really kind of like hit my stride, I would say, in terms of my career. Got to really learn what I was good at, and what people came to me for, what I enjoyed, really importantly. And so that was a really important part. I did a bit of a pivot after the pandemic, so I was headhunted into an investment and innovation firm. So I've been doing that for around about the last 2 years. So we focus on retail and consumer and work across the whole investment ecosystem, so venture capital, private equity, as well as innovation advisory. So that essentially means that we help solve problems for some of the biggest retailers around the world. So some you'd be familiar with, like John Lewis, M&S, Primark, Abercrombie and Fitch, Walgreens, Walmart, Coca-Cola. So really bringing that experience from my agency time and working on those brands to really bring that through to a whole new ecosystem of investment. So never thought I would have ended up in finance, but here we are, and I would say it's definitely my time in agency and kind of this world of marketing and advertising, bringing that through is really interesting to see how you can apply your skill sets in a completely new world, and how you can really lean into that point of difference.
Definitely.
It's been interesting.
We'll talk about the finance part in a bit and what finance world is like, but you talked about your career journey and going to a global role within a network agency, a global senior role. What are some of the other highlights to your career? What other successes have you had that you'd like to pinpoint?
So I would say a highlight for me was really getting to the point where I felt like I had something to give back. And I think learning at various points of your career, even when you're going through, challenging times, when you really think like, what's the lesson to learn here? And I think now, like for me, mentoring and, really sharing those experiences and, how to kind of potentially swerve, different things, or how to build confidence, things like that. It's been really rewarding for me. I would say in terms of highlights, I have really enjoyed working on, obviously like global campaigns, global events, and being able to do that really scrappily with small teams, and really know, what my contribution to that has been really rewarding. But
Sorry,
and then since joining my current company, I would say definitely bringing that new perspective into how we are bringing really complex concepts to life. So whether that is generative AI, we ran an event with Amazon a few weeks ago. We did one around sustainable materials, and again, bringing our investors, the different retailers that we work with, the founders that we work with for the early stage businesses, and really making the complex more simple. And inclusion and access is so important to me, and I think definitely being in this new world, you really see how some constructs have been shaped to make it hard for people to understand them. And I think bringing bringing all of my marketing skill set to that, it's been a real highlight to be in the rooms and say, guys, like, why are we overcomplicating this? Like, okay, generative AI.
It's not a dark science. We try and make out that it is.
No, not at all. And I think, to me, intelligence has always been how do you communicate things in a way that everyone can understand, not how are you doing that in a way that is keeping people out.
Yeah.
So again, we did an event which was all around sustainable materials and just showing people. So, like lab-grown fur, like what does that feel like? Or, with generative AI, how is that coming to life in a way that is new and different, rather than something that's like you need a PhD to understand, which isn't that great, right? Because that's like 1% of the population.
Of course. You mentioned a couple of words that I'm going to delve a bit deeper into. So you talked about mentorship and importance of mentorship.
Yeah.
So mentorship, allyship, sponsorship. I'm going to use the word allyship. I've got Dave Katz sitting in the front. It's good to have a guy not just at the bar but actually listening into the conversation.
The guys are loving the bar though.
Exactly, they are loving the bar. But I've known Katzy, let's not even go there. How many years I've known him. But it's important, isn't it, to have males in the room, in the conversation. Although this is a female leaders bar, it's not a space excluding men. In fact, we want to involve them. But how has mentorship, allyship, sponsorship helped within your career, and how does it continue to help within your career?
Yeah, so I think a big part of it is you can't be what you don't know exists. So for me, I think that's been a really core part of just looking around and seeing, who is in that role maybe 3 steps ahead of you, or in a different industry who seems like they're thriving. And I think having either a mentor or, a sponsor, I do think there can be a bit of a tendency to put labels on things. Like it can just be a friend that you meet at an event, right? And I think, so much focus has been put on mentorship and sponsorship, and I think people can almost like rush it, and at a first meeting with someone, just because of their job title, be like, can you be my mentor? Yeah. And, I think that's like asking someone to marry you on a first date, right? And I think it's also, you need to diversify I like to think of it as like your board. So, thinking, okay, you might have someone that you go to for advice on building your confidence, or you have someone that, if you're a sector specialist that's absolutely killing it in that industry, that you can ask a specific question to. But, I don't think it needs to necessarily be just limited to a very formalized relationship.
That's a really good point, actually.
Yeah, also I think you grow, right? Hopefully you're, 6 months later, you may not have that issue anymore. So I think being a bit more flexible about how you are building that board of directors, I think is really important, because, you can learn from so many people, and, whether that's family, friends, or, more, corporate kind of people like that. So I think that's a differentiation point that's really important to make. I think also, for me, it was very much around having people that believed in me, that were just part of my network.
Those champions and cheerleaders are so important, whether male or female, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is understanding, especially when you are building diverse and inclusive workforces, is that just because someone hasn't done something before doesn't mean they can't do it, right? So a big part of that is finding people, and men, women, all kinds of genders, that can see you and say, Ellie, I think you'd be great at this. I know you've done this today, but what about having a go at this? And like backing you to do that.
And also challenging your thinking, because you're right, often we can say, okay, I'm good at this, so I'll stick to this, but somebody giving a different perspective. Yeah,
and I think that's really important. So for me, being completely honest with you, when the headhunter called me for my current role, the first thing I said to them was, finance, like, have you looked at my LinkedIn? Where are you? And they were like, hey, don't say that when you meet the company. Lead with, your 14 years of, global marketing experience, and, what you've actually done. And I think that was a really helpful point for me. And I think just thinking everyone was at a point where they were doing something for the first time. So I think understanding that, and again, I think that mentorship and sponsorship, if you have good people around you that are honest about that, right? Of, like when I first did X, I didn't know what I was doing, but this is what I did to build confidence in that.
And also people that you can ask questions to, so you're not afraid to ask. It's not it's not a silly question. It's saying, actually, I don't know this. Well, can you help me with this? Can you point me in that right direction?
Exactly. So that's really important. And that's
cool. Yeah. What about advice? It's always good to leave the audience with some advice, some tangibles. You've pivoted, as you say, from kind of the media side to finance. What would you advise somebody looking to either pivot, or somebody looking to take that next step in their journey, in their career?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to keep that open mindset. So just because you may have been doing X or Y for however long, you know, keep an open mind. Always be looking around and make sure that you're engaged in what you're doing, you're feeling like you're learning. I think that's really important. Knowing your strengths and what you're really good at, because I think it doesn't matter who your connections may be, you know, or, you know, how great you may be to work with. You know, you need to know your specialism and really put in the time to do that. And that's essentially how confidence is built, and how, you know, for me in a lot of rooms, you know, I may not, you know, I may be the only one with my background culturally. You know, detecting an accent, I've grown up in a few different places. My background in terms of marketing, especially now in a new industry, or being, you know, a young female of color, like things like that. And you have to really build a thick skin and back yourself knowing that I'm really good at this. This
and
is
you
my
deserve
recommendation.
to be in that room.
Exactly,
Yeah,
and you know, take up your space.
Yeah.
So that would be a big part of advice that I would have. I would say also a really big point would be around wielding your wealth wisely, which is a bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah, talk about that, because when we were talking earlier, I think that's a really interesting point. Can you delve a bit deeper as to what you mean about that?
So there's a stat which I absolutely love, which the Centre of Economics and Business released, which is 60% of personal wealth is going to be with women by 2025. So I think really understanding, as a consumer, what your money and, you know, what you're asking for, what you're demanding for, like that means something. And I think getting really close to that is important. I think also understanding as investors, you know, what landscape of business do you want to be looking at? And I think, you know, getting into the early stage venture capital side of things.
And it's something that a lot of females are hesitant to do, isn't it? I mean, in terms of female funding, we know that there's not a lot of money going to female founded companies.
Yeah,
but
less than 2% of VC money going to female founders at the moment.
But I think also a lot of females are hesitant about getting into that world of investment, because you think, do I need, you know, a six-figure lump sum to put down? But there are different ways to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think understanding that landscape is so important, and understanding even in angel investment, a big part of that isn't necessarily having, you know, squillions of pounds to invest in something. You know, it can be having, you know, 1,000 and saying, okay, I've got value beyond this capital. I have this expertise. I have this network. Or, you know, building, if you have a community and you're saying, okay, we want to build something called a special purpose vehicle, which essentially means you can have a syndicate and then invest that money as a group. So I think, again, building that wealth and understanding, you know, what future do we all want to exist in? And I think there is more than ever before female founders that are joining the market. So I think supporting them is really important.
Definitely.
And also just thinking of your experience and, you know, how valuable that is and what you can bring to that world. Because I think seeing the stats also, I think we've got the most in the retail and consumer sector, the most female CEOs that we've ever had, but that kind of middle level and who is going up into that, I think, you know, a lot of people here of where you may be in your careers and thinking, you know, could I have that top seat and what will I be looking to do when I have it?
On that, what would you be looking to do, or how to get to that? What advice would you give to your younger self? So, young Danny looking to get into the industry, what would you say to her?
Yeah, so I think trust the process is a really good point that I think myself, I've, you know, definitely had a tendency to try and think 3 steps ahead. And I think, you know, you need to kind of just enjoy where you are. And I think understand that the dots, they make sense when you look backwards. But when you're going forward, sometimes they don't make sense, right? And I think it's really about creating variety for yourself in your career, like knowing your strengths, and I think backing yourself. So, you know, if you get any kind of like, oh, you need to talk less or be less bossy or whatever, know what to brush and know what you need to, you know, take on. Yes, exactly. So I think that's really important. So yeah, trusting the process. And I think having fun is a really important point. Like, I think that's a core value of mine. If I'm not having fun, and obviously along with that, you know, doing a good job and, you know, obviously enjoying what I do. But yeah, make space for that, because I think unless you're a surgeon and you literally are saving lives, you know, there should be room. Even surgeons should be allowed to have fun. But, you know, I think...
I mean, look where we are. We're having fun.
Yeah,
right?
it's not that bad.
There are worse things to be doing.
So yeah, I think enjoying that process and really listening to that, honing your instinct, that if you're not enjoying it, you know, you can move. And I think for me, definitely having worked in different markets, moving abroad, you know, understanding, you know, you can take a risk, you know, home, whether that's a place or a job, you know, you can always go back. No one's kind of taking that from you. And I think one more is just always invest in your education, because I think, again, that can never be taken away from you.
That's a mantra of mine, never stop learning, and it could be, there's so many different ways, but that's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Danny, the last question I'd like to ask you, because I think we're going to be kicked off stage soon, is about networks and the importance of networks. And there are lots of female-led networks, there are initiatives, but what about within the finance? I'd like to kind of delve into that within the finance sector. Like, how has networks helped you or hindered you, or what would you advise people within that sector to look for?
Yeah, so I would say networks coming into a whole new industry. I would say when you change industries, keep your contacts from wherever you've been, because again, that is your point of difference of understanding how more than one place works. I think is really important. For me, networks, I've absolutely loved exploring especially the London, VC ecosystem. There is so much amazing talent and passion that is around at the moment. So many new VC funds that are looking to invest in different specialisms, whether that's climate change, whether that's black entrepreneurs, whether that is female founders. I think it's probably the most exciting time for that there ever has been, and it's a great community. So my only tip on that would be always take time when you meet people to just make a connection and make it something that even if it's personal of like what are you into out of work, or just take the time to build that, because you never know where your paths may cross.
Can be, they can come in useful. Definitely.
Exactly. So I think having that in mind, and I'm really lucky to be a part of a few different networks as well. We're part of one together that you've set up, and it brings so much joy to just be able to, I think, celebrate each other and have those ecosystems.
Having those cheerleaders there, it's important, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so
but
important.
Also sharing opportunities as well, and that's what we've done.
Yeah, so. Because I think sometimes it is just a case of the way that panels may lay out, or businesses may be built. It's just based on people trying to do things quickly. Yeah. And I think that's where things like networks or like nepotism can come into play, where because people think, okay, right, I need someone to do this or be on this panel. They've got 100 things they need to do, so they will say, hey, Ellie, do you know anyone? And you may say, oh yeah, these 3 people. But I think taking that extra step of like, whenever I'm organizing panels as part of my job or events, I don't care if it takes me a little bit longer. I will ensure that I have a diverse panel because it's important to me. But, I think just understanding how can you make that easier for other people. And I think having those networks is so important for that. Because it's just a question, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, who do you know? And, when you ask it, you'll be so surprised at how much talent there is to help you with whatever it is, or, get someone in a job if you're building a business. And just thinking a little bit outside the box, which, as we know, leads to better commercial outcomes anyway. So, it's worth it.
Thank you for being part of my network. Yeah. Thank you for sharing the stage with me, Danny.
Thanks for having me.
Hand over to Katie.